The great obsidian tower of the Galactic Council rose from the center of Nexus Prime like a black knife cutting into the sky. Its crystal windows caught the light of 3 distant suns and scattered it across the massive station that served as the heart of galactic civilization. Inside, representatives from 47 different species were taking their seats in the circular meeting hall. The air was thick with tension, though most of the delegates did not yet understand why. High Chancellor. Xerath floated to her position at the center of the chamber. She was ancient beyond measure, her translucent body revealing the slow pulse of glowing organs beneath her skin. She had led the council for 6,000 years, and in all that time, she had never faced a situation quite like this one. Ambassador? Karath of the Villani Dominion clicked his mandibles together as he adjusted his ceremonial robes. His species had been part of the council for nearly 1,000,000 years. They had seen countless younger races rise from their homeworlds and take their first steps into the galaxy. The pattern was always the same. The new species would be amazed by the vastness of space. They would be humbled by the ancient civilizations they encountered. And eventually they would learn their place. Today's meeting was about the newest species to reach the stars. They called themselves humans. And they had emerged from a small blue planet on the outer edge of the galaxy barely 300 years ago. By galactic standards, they were infants. Newborns who had just learned to crawl. And yet somehow, in those 300 years, they had colonized over 200 worlds. They had spread across the spiral arm like a growing stain, building cities and stations and outposts wherever they went. The other species had watched this expansion with growing concern. And now the council had decided it was time to put the humans in their place. The Villani Dominion wanted tribute, 40% of all agricultural output from human worlds, to be delivered annually as a sign of respect. The Sorthian Empire demanded military access through human space, including the right to station fleets in the Sol system, where humanity had first evolved. The Collective of Minds wanted genetic samples from every human colony. For their great archive of biological data, every major power had submitted their list of demands. The humans would have no choice but to accept. They were too young, too weak, too primitive to refuse. Korath leaned toward his aide. A younger Villani, who had never seen a new species, integrated into galactic society. "Watch carefully," he whispered. "You will see how this is done. They will argue at first. They will try to negotiate. But in the end, they will kneel. They always do." The hour arrived when the human delegation was supposed to appear. The delegates waited. Some checked their communication devices. Others engaged in quiet conversation with their neighbors. The Sorthians, massive predators from a high-gravity world, sat perfectly still and watched the entrance with their 6 eyes. 1 hour passed. Then 2, the delegates began to grow restless. This was extremely unusual. New species were always eager to meet the council, always desperate to make a good impression. Delays were unheard of. Finally, after nearly 3 hours of waiting, a single human vessel dropped out of faster-than-light travel and docked at the station. The council watched through the chamber's external sensors as a small shuttle detached from the ship and made its way to the diplomatic entrance. The doors to the council chamber opened, and a single human walked in. His name was Samuel Drake, and he was utterly unremarkable by human standards. He stood about average height for his species, with hair that had turned gray at the temples and calm brown eyes that seemed to take in everything without revealing anything. He wore no ceremonial robes, no badges of office, no symbols of rank. Just a simple navy blue uniform with a small patch on the shoulder that showed a planet, surrounded by stars. He walked to the center of the chamber and stopped. He did not bow. He did not kneel. He simply stood there, looking around at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. High Chancellor Xerath was the first to speak. "Where is your delegation?" she demanded, her voice echoing through the acoustic chambers. "Where are your diplomats? Your legal advisors? Your trade negotiators? We were told that humanity would send representatives to discuss the terms of your integration into galactic society." Samuel looked at her for a long moment before responding. "There will be no delegation," he said. His voice was calm, almost casual. "Humanity declines to negotiate. For a moment there was absolute silence. Then the chamber erupted into chaos. Korath shot to his feet, his exoskeleton rattling with outrage. "This is unacceptable," he shouted. "This is unprecedented. Every species negotiates with the Council. It is the foundation of galactic order." The Sorthian representative, a massive creature named Grell, rose from his seat. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, and his voice was a deep rumble that made the floor vibrate. "Perhaps the human does not understand what is happening here. Perhaps his species is even more primitive than we thought." Samuel did not flinch. He did not step back. He simply waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. "I understand perfectly," he said. "I have reviewed the terms that each of you submitted. The Villani want 40% of our food production. The Sorthians want to put military bases in our home system. The collective wants pieces of our bodies for their collection." He paused, and something in his eyes hardened. "These are not negotiations. These are demands for submission." "You are a young species," Zyrith said, her bioluminescent organs flickering with irritation. "All young species must accept guidance from those who came before. This is the way of things." "Perhaps it was the way of things," Samuel replied. "Perhaps every species before us looked at the size of your fleets and the age of your civilizations and decided that submission was the only option. But we are not those species." Rel laughed, a harsh sound like rocks grinding together. "You have fewer than 1,000 warships. Your weapons are primitive. Your defenses are laughable. What exactly makes you think you can refuse?" Samuel turned to face him. "History," he said simply. "Your history is barely a footnote in the galactic record." "That is true. But it is a very interesting footnote." Samuel looked around the chamber again, making eye contact with representative after representative. "We did not come here to make threats, but we will not be threatened either. Humanity offers friendship to those who offer friendship, trade to those who trade fairly. But submission?" He shook his head slowly. "That is not in our nature." High Chancellor Zirith studied him for a long moment. In 6,000 years of leadership, she had seen many things. But she had never seen a species representative stand alone in this chamber and refuse the Council's demands. "You have 1 week to reconsider your position," she said finally. "After that period, the Council will discuss appropriate measures to address your refusal." Samuel nodded once. 1 week? Understood. He turned and walked toward the exit without waiting to be dismissed. At the doorway, he paused and looked back over his shoulder. "I suggest you use that week wisely. Learn about us. Really learn. You might find it educational." Then he was gone, leaving behind a council chamber filled with confusion, outrage, and something that none of them wanted to admit, fear. The doors closed behind Samuel Drake, and the council chamber descended into chaos. Representatives shouted over each other in dozens of languages, their translation devices struggling to keep pace with the overlapping voices. Ambassador Korath was on his feet, his mandibles clicking so rapidly that they blurred together. The Sorthians were growling low in their throats, a sound that usually preceded violence. Even the normally calm representatives of the collective were shifting in their seats, their linked minds buzzing with confusion. High Chancellor Zyrith raised her tendrils for silence. But it took several minutes before the chamber finally quieted down. In all her years of service, she had never witnessed such a complete breakdown of diplomatic protocol. "This is madness," Korath said, his voice still trembling with rage. "No species has ever refused the Council. Not once in 12 million years of galactic civilization. Who do these humans think they are?" "They are children," Grell rumbled from his seat. "Arrogant children who do not understand the universe they have stumbled into. Perhaps a demonstration of force is required to teach them their place." Zyrith considered this. The Sorthians were always eager for military solutions. Their species had evolved as apex predators, and they had never quite lost the instinct to solve problems through violence. But their suggestion was not without merit. Perhaps a show of overwhelming force would convince the humans to reconsider. "What do our military advisors say?" She asked. A Villani general named Drath stood and activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber. Images appeared showing human warships, weapons systems, and defensive installations. The numbers were almost laughable. Humanity had exactly 847 combat-capable vessels. Their largest ship was smaller than a Sorthian cruiser. Their weapons were based on primitive kinetic and energy systems that galactic civilizations had abandoned millions of years ago. From a purely military perspective, Dreth said, humanity poses no threat. A Combin. Ed Council fleet could neutralize their entire navy in a matter of days. Their colonies have minimal orbital defenses. Their ground forces are poorly equipped by our standards. In short, they cannot possibly win a military conflict against us. Grell made a satisfied rumbling sound. Then we should send a fleet immediately. Not to attack, but to remind them of their position. A few warships in orbit around their homeworld should encourage them to be more reasonable. But Representative Myra of the collective held up a hand. She was a humanoid figure, though her skin had a faint blue tint and her eyes were solid black. When she spoke, her voice carried strange harmonics, the result of 1,000 linked minds speaking in unison. "We urge caution," she said. "We have been analyzing the data on humanity, and we have found some troubling patterns. Their military weakness may not be as significant as it appears." Kareth made a dismissive clicking sound. "Numbers do not lie. They have fewer ships, weaker weapons, and no experience fighting galactic-level conflicts. What could possibly make them a threat?" "Their history," Mira replied. "We have studied the records they broadcast into space, their entertainment media, their historical documents. What we found was disturbing." She took control of the holographic display and brought up a series of images. They showed scenes of destruction on a scale that made even the Sorthians uncomfortable. Cities reduced to rubble, landscapes scarred by massive explosions, mushroom clouds rising over populated areas. 300 years ago, humanity fought a war against itself. They called it World War III. During this conflict, they used nuclear weapons on their own planet. They destroyed their own cities, poisoned their own land, and killed millions of their own kind. The chamber fell silent. Nuclear weapons were not unknown to galactic civilizations, but no species had ever used them on their own homeworld. The very idea was unthinkable. After the war, Mira continued, their planet was devastated. Experts predicted that it would take thousands of years for them to recover. Instead, they rebuilt within a single generation. 30 years after nuclear fire swept across their world, they launched their first interstellar colony ship. "That is impossible," Dreth said. "No species could recover that quickly." And yet they did. We have verified the data multiple times. They do not merely survive disasters. They adapt to them. They grow stronger from them. Mira paused, her black eyes sweeping across the chamber. "There is a word in their language for this. They call it resilience." Grell shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The Sorthians were powerful warriors, but even they knew better than to fight an enemy that could survive nuclear devastation and come back stronger. "What else have you learned?" Xerath asked. Mira brought up more images. These showed humans in various extreme environments. Frozen wastelands where the temperature dropped far below freezing, toxic planets with poisonous atmospheres, desert worlds where water was almost non-existent. In every image, the humans were not just surviving but thriving. They do not colonize like other species, Mira explained. Most civilizations carefully select worlds that are already suitable for life. They build enclosed cities and maintain controlled environments. Humans do the opposite. They land on hostile worlds and change them. They call it terraforming. They reshape entire planets to match their biology. "That takes centuries," Korth said. "What is the point of starting a project you will never see completed?" "That is precisely what makes them dangerous," Mira replied. "They think in timescales that other species do not. They plant trees they will never see grow. They build structures designed to outlast their own lifespans. They are obsessed with legacy, with leaving something behind for future generations." Xerath felt a cold sensation spreading through her ancient body. She had assumed that humanity's rapid expansion was a sign of recklessness, a young species that did not understand the dangers of the galaxy. But what if it was something else? What if it was the behavior of a species that had already faced extinction and decided that spreading as fast as possible was the only way to survive? "There is one more thing," Mira said. She brought up a final set of images. These showed scenes from human entertainment media. Movies, television shows, books, games. The subjects were similar across all of them. Humans facing impossible odds. Humans fighting enemies far more powerful than themselves. Humans winning against all expectations. They tell themselves stories, Mira said. From the moment they are born, they are surrounded by narratives of victory against overwhelming odds. They are taught that no obstacle is insurmountable, no enemy undefeatable. This is not arrogance. This is conditioning. They genuinely believe that they can overcome anything. The chamber was silent for a long moment. So what are you suggesting? Grell finally asked. That we simply allow them to defy the council? That we accept their refusal and do nothing? We are suggesting, Mira said, that we think very carefully before we do anything. Because if we push them into a corner, they will not surrender. They will fight. And even if we win, the cost may be higher than any of us are prepared to pay. Xerath looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. For the first time in her 6,000 years of leadership, she saw something she had never expected to see. Doubt the week that followed. Samuel Drake's appearance before the council was unlike anything the galaxy had experienced in millions of years. Across 100 worlds, intelligence agencies scrambled to gather information on humanity. Analysts worked around the clock, translating documents, studying broadcasts, and trying to understand the species that had just defied the most powerful organization in known space. On the Sorthian, homeworld, a planet of crushing gravity and endless storms. General Vrex sat in his command center and studied the reports coming in from his agents. He was old for a Sorthian, nearly 400 years, and he had fought in more wars than he could easily remember. His body was covered with scars from battles against a dozen different species, and his 6 eyes had seen things that would drive lesser beings mad, but the data in front of him made him uncomfortable in a way that combat never had. Tell me about their military history, he ordered his aide, young Sorthian named Krell, who had been assigned to compile the human intelligence reports. Krell activated a display and began scrolling through images. Their recorded history goes back approximately 10,000 years. In that time, they have been almost constantly at war with each other. With each other? Rex interrupted. Not with external enemies? They had no external enemies until they reached space. All of their wars were internal. Different groups of humans fighting other groups of humans over territory, resources, ideology, religion. Krell paused. Sometimes they fought for reasons that our analysts cannot understand at all. Vrex leaned forward. Show me examples. Krell brought up a map of Earth as it had appeared several hundred years ago. This is a conflict they called World War II. It involved most of the major powers on their planet and lasted for 6 years. Approximately 70 million humans died. The number was staggering. 70 million dead in a single conflict, and they had fought it against themselves. The Sorthians had fought many wars, but they had never suffered casualties on that scale. During this war, Krell continued, a nation called the Soviet Union was invaded by another nation called Germany. The Germans were technologically superior and had been winning battles across the continent. When they reached a city called Stalingrad, they expected to capture it within weeks. How long did it take? 5 months. The humans fought, building by building, room by room. When they ran out of ammunition, they fought with knives. When they ran out of knives, they fought with their bare hands. By the end, the city was completely destroyed, but the defenders had never surrendered. The German army that attacked Stalingrad was destroyed instead. Vrex stared at the images. He had fought against many species in his long life, and he had learned to recognize the moment when an enemy broke. Every species had a breaking point, a level of suffering beyond which they would surrender rather than continue fighting. He had always assumed this was a universal constant, but these humans had watched their city burn around them and kept fighting anyway. There is more, Krell said. He brought up another set of images. A few years before Stalingrad, there was a smaller conflict between a nation called Finland and the Soviet Union. Finland had a population of approximately 4 million. The Soviets had over 170 million. That is a ratio of over 40 to 1. The Finns could not possibly have one. They did not win, Krell agreed. But they did not lose either. They fought for 3 months in winter conditions that would kill most species. Individual Finnish soldiers became famous for killing hundreds of enemy troops each. One soldier, using nothing but a rifle, killed over 500 Soviets before the war ended. Rex felt his combat instincts stirring. 500 kills by a single soldier with primitive weapons? That was not normal. That was not something any rational being would attempt. The Soviets eventually forced Finland to give up some territory, Krell continued. But the cost was so high that they never attempted another invasion. The Finns made themselves too expensive to conquer. Meanwhile, on Valani Prime, Ambassador Korath was receiving similarly disturbing report. C had summoned his top scientists to explain what they had learned about human biology. And the answers were not reassuring. They are persistence predators, the lead scientist explained. On their homeworld, they evolved to hunt by exhaustion. They would select a prey animal and simply follow it until it collapsed from fatigue. Their bodies are designed for endurance over speed. How is that relevant to military matters? Korath asked impatiently, because it means they do not give up. Their psychology is built around the concept of continuing forward until the goal is achieved. They have a saying, fall down 7 times, get up 8. It is not just a philosophy. It is how their minds are structured. The scientists brought up a biological diagram. They also have an unusual response to stress. When threatened, their bodies produce chemicals that suppress pain and increase strength and speed. They call it adrenaline. In extreme situations, humans have been documented lifting objects that should be far too heavy for their muscle structure, or continuing to fight despite injuries that should have killed them. No. Korath felt his mandibles clicking nervously. Are you saying they become more dangerous when injured? In some cases, yes. We have records of human soldiers who continued fighting after losing limbs. After being shot multiple times, after suffering wounds that would instantly incapacitate any other species, their bodies simply refused to stop. The collective of minds had gathered the most comprehensive data of all. Their networked intelligence allowed them to process information far faster than any individual being, and they had devoted enormous resources to understanding humanity. Representative Mira called an emergency meeting with the Council's military advisors to share their findings. We have analyzed over 10,000 human conflicts, she reported. We have studied their tactics, their strategies, their psychology, and we have reached a conclusion that we believe the Council must hear. Go on, Zereth said. Humans are not rational actors in the way that galactic civilizations understand rationality. They do not calculate odds and act accordingly. They do not surrender when defeat is certain. They do not prioritize survival above all other values. Mira paused. They have a concept they call glory. It means achieving something meaningful, even at the cost of one's own life. This concept is so powerful that humans will deliberately seek out situations where death is likely, simply for the chance to accomplish something they consider worthy. General Vrex, participating via holographic link from the Sorthian homeworld, spoke up. Every species has some individuals who behave irrationally. That does not make them a military threat, misunderstand, Mira replied. This is not the behavior of individuals. This is the behavior of their entire species. Their culture celebrates those who sacrifice themselves for others. Their religions promise rewards for dying in service of a cause. Their entertainment glorifies warriors who face impossible odds. She looked around the chamber. They have bred themselves for war. Not war as we understand it, with clear objectives and acceptable casualties. War is an expression of identity. War is a way of life. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then perhaps, Zereth said slowly, we have been approaching this situation incorrectly. We assumed that humans would behave like every other species. We assumed that a show of force would convince them to submit. But if what you are telling us is true, then force might have the opposite effect. That is our assessment, Mira confirmed. If we attack them, we will not break their will. We will unite them. And a united humanity fighting for survival is something that this council may not be prepared to face. Korath made an uncomfortable clicking sound. So what do we do? Simply accept their defiance? Zirith considered the question carefully. In 12 million years of galactic history, no species had ever successfully defied the Council. But then again, no species quite like humanity had ever existed. "We wait," she said finally. "We let the week pass. And when the human returns, we listen to what he has to say. Really listen. Because I am beginning to think that we have made a serious miscalculation." 6 days had passed since Samuel Drake walked out of the council chamber, and the atmosphere on Nexus Prime had changed completely. Where there had been arrogance and dismissal before, now there was something closer to panic. Representatives who had laughed at humanity's refusal were now quietly reviewing the intelligence reports and wondering if they had made a terrible mistake. High Chancellor Zirith had called an emergency session to discuss the situation before the human returned. The circular amphitheater was packed with delegates, military advisors, and intelligence analysts. Everyone wanted to know what the council would do. No one seemed to have any good answers. Ambassador Korath was the first to speak. His voice had lost some of its earlier confidence, but he was still pushing for a strong response. "We cannot simply accept their defiance," he argued. "If we allow one species to refuse our terms, others will follow. The entire galactic order depends on new civilizations accepting their place in the hierarchy. And what do you propose?" Zirith asked. "Military action?" Korath hesitated. A week ago, he would have said yes without a second thought. But the reports he had read since then had changed his perspective. Perhaps a limited demonstration. Something to show them that resistance is futile. General Vrex, attending via holographic projection from the Sorthian fleet, shook his massive head. "I have commanded military forces for 300 years. I have fought against 17 different species and never lost a campaign. But after reviewing the human data, I must advise against any military action." The chamber buzzed with surprise. The Sorthians never advised against military action. They were the most aggressive species in the council, always eager for war, explained Zirith ordered. Vrex brought up a holographic display showing a simulation. "My staff has run over 10,000 combat scenarios. In 98% of them, we achieve military victory within 6 months. Our technology is superior. Our numbers are greater. Our experience is vastly more extensive. By any reasonable measure, we should crush them easily." "Then what is the problem?" Korath asked. "The problem is what happens after we win." Vrex zoomed in on the simulation, showing the aftermath of various battles. "Humans do not surrender. Even when we destroy their fleets, they continue fighting with whatever they have left. When we occupy their planets, they resist. They sabotage. They fight in the streets, in the buildings, in the tunnels beneath their cities. They use weapons that other species would never consider, because those weapons kill their own people along with ours." He brought up a specific scenario. "In this simulation, we conquered Earth itself. We landed troops in every major city. We destroyed their government and their military command structure. The war should have been over. Instead, the fighting continued for another 50 years. Individual humans formed resistance groups and attacked our forces using bombs, poison, and ambush. They deliberately targeted civilian areas because they knew we would respond with force that would kill more humans, which would create more resistance fighters." Zirith stared at the simulation. "You are saying they would sacrifice their own civilians to hurt us. I am saying that their concept of victory is different from ours. We fight to achieve objectives and then return to peace. They fight until one side is completely destroyed. There is no middle ground. There is no negotiated settlement after combat begins. There is only total victory or total defeat." Representative Mira of the collective spoke next. "We have analyzed the psychological profiles in greater detail, and we believe we understand why humans behave this way. Their evolutionary history was exceptionally violent. For most of their existence, they competed against other predators for limited resources. They developed pack behaviors that prioritize group survival over individual survival." She brought up images of early human societies. When a human group was threatened, individuals would volunteer to fight and die so that others could escape. This behavior was so common that it became embedded in their genetic code. Humans feel a biological compulsion to protect their group, even at the cost of their own lives. But surely that only applies to their immediate family, Korath said. They cannot feel the same loyalty to strangers. That is what makes them truly dangerous, me. Ra replied. They have the ability to extend their sense of group identity to include anyone they choose. All humans can be considered part of the same group. If we attack any human world, every human world will respond as if we attacked them personally. We would not be fighting a few 100 billion people on a few hundred worlds. We would be fighting a single organism with a population of nearly 2 trillion. The number hung in the air. 2 trillion humans, all of them conditioned from birth to never surrender, all of them willing to die for each other. There is another factor to consider, General Vrex added. Their technology is primitive by our standards, but it is advancing at an alarming rate. 300 years ago, they were fighting with chemical explosives and simple spacecraft. Now they have developed faster-than-light travel, energy weapons, and shields that can withstand significant damage. If we give them another century, they may close the technological gap entirely. Then we should act now, Korath insisted, before they become even stronger. If we act now, we guarantee a war that could last generations. If we wait, they may become impossible to defeat at all. Rex shook his head again. There is no good option. We should have dealt with them when they first reached space, before they spread to so many worlds. Now it is too late for easy solutions. Xyrith felt the weight of 12 million years of galactic history pressing down on her. The Council had maintained order for so long because every species had eventually accepted its authority. There had been wars, of course, but they had always ended with the weaker party surrendering and accepting terms. The system worked because everyone understood the rules, but humans did not play by the rules. They did not calculate odds and act accordingly. They did not value their own survival above all other considerations. They were a species that had survived nuclear war by sheer determination, that had colonized hostile worlds through willpower alone, that had bred themselves to fight until the last individual was dead. What would happen, Xyrith asked slowly, if we simply accepted their refusal? If we recognized them as equals and asked them what they want? The chamber fell silent. No species had ever been granted equal status without first proving themselves through decades or centuries of integration. The suggestion was revolutionary. It would be admitting that we cannot control them, Korath said. Other species would see it as weakness. Other species would see it as wisdom, Myra countered. We have always claimed that the Council exists to maintain peace and promote cooperation. If we attack a species simply because they refuse to submit to our demands, we prove that we are nothing more than tyrants who maintain power through force. The collective had always been the most philosophical of the Council races, and their perspective was worth considering. There is something else, Mira continued. Humans are not just fighters. They are also builders, creators, explorers. Their culture produces art, music, literature, at a rate that exceeds most galactic civilizations. Their scientists make discoveries that surprise even our most advanced researchers. If we can find a way to coexist with them, they could become a valuable addition to galactic civilization. But if we force them into a war, we will never see what they might have become. We will only see what they are capable of destroying. Xyrith looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. Most of them still looked skeptical, but the certainty that had filled the room a week ago was gone. They had come expecting to punish a rebellious young species. Now they were wondering if that rebellion might be the spark that burned down everything they had built. Tomorrow, Xyrith announced, the human will return, and when he does, I will speak with him personally. Not to deliver demands, but to ask a question that we should have asked from the beginning. She paused, her bioluminescent organs flickering with something that might have been hope or might have been fear. I will ask him what humanity wants. The 7th day arrived, and Samuel Drake walked into the council chamber exactly on time. He wore the same simple uniform he had worn before, without any additional decoration or ceremony. His expression was calm, his movements unhurried. He looked like a man who had already won and was simply waiting for everyone to realize it. The atmosphere in the chamber had transformed completely. A week ago, the delegates had looked at him with contempt and dismissal. Now they watched him with something closer to respect, and in some cases, fear. The intelligence reports had done their work. Every representative in the room now understood that this unremarkable human represented something far more dangerous than any military fleet. "Hi, Chancellor." Zyrith rose from her seat and floated to the center of the chamber. For 6,000 years, she had been the voice of galactic authority, the final arbiter of disputes between species. She had never needed to negotiate with anyone. Her word was law. But today was different. Today, she was going to do something that no High Chancellor had ever done before. "Captain Drake," she began, her voice carrying through the acoustic chambers. "The Council has spent this past week studying your species. We have reviewed your history, your culture, your capabilities, and we have come to a conclusion." Samuel nodded but said nothing. He simply waited. "We were wrong," Zyrith continued. The words hung in the air, shocking in their simplicity. Several delegates made sounds of surprise, but Zyrith silenced them with a wave of her tendril. "We approached humanity the same way we have approached every new species for 12 million years. We assumed that you would recognize our superior power and accept a subordinate role in galactic civilization. We were wrong." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "You are not like other species. Your history, your psychology, your culture, all of it is built around a single principle that we failed to understand. You do not surrender. You do not submit. You do not accept defeat, even when defeat is certain." She looked directly at Samuel. "This makes you dangerous. But it also makes you valuable. A species that never gives up, that adapts to any challenge. That survives anything the universe throws at it. Such a species could be a powerful ally." Samuel's expression did not change, but something in his eyes softened slightly. "Go on. The Council is prepared to recognize humanity as a sovereign civilization, entitled to all rights and protections thereof. No tribute will be demanded. No military access required. No genetic samples requested. You will be treated as equals, with full voting rights and representation in all Council matters." Ambassador Korath rose from his seat, his mandibles clicking in protest. "This is unprecedented. We have never granted equal status to any species without centuries of integration. This is capitulation." "This is wisdom," Zyrith replied. "Something we seem to have forgotten." She turned back to Samuel. "But before we formalize this agreement, I have a question. A question that we should have asked from the beginning, instead of making demands." "Ask it," Samuel said. "What does humanity want?" The chamber fell silent. It was such a simple question, but in all the discussions and debates and analysis of the past week, no one had thought to ask it. They had been so focused on what they wanted from humanity that they had never considered what humanity might want from them. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm and thoughtful, as if he had been waiting for this question all along. "We want what every species wants. Safety for our children. Room to grow. The chance to build something that lasts." He looked around the chamber, making eye contact with representative after representative. "We did not come to the stars to bow, but we did not come to conquer either. We came because we could not stay still. We looked up at the night sky and we needed to know what was there. We needed to touch it, to explore it, to make it ours. If other species stand in your way," Grell asked, his voice a low rumble. Samuel turned to face him. "Then we will go around them, or through them, or we will wait until they move. We are patient when we need to be. We have planted forests we will never see. We have built cathedrals that took 10 generations to complete. We measure time differently than you do. You speak of patience," Korath said. "But your expansion has been anything but patient. In 300 years, you have colonized more worlds than some species manage in 10,000. That is not impatience. That is desperation." Samuel's voice hardened slightly. "Our ancestors nearly destroyed our homeworld. They came within a few degrees of making Earth uninhabitable. They looked at the damage they had done and made a choice. Spread as fast as possible, as far as possible, so that no single disaster could ever threaten our entire species again. We are not expanding because we want to conquer. We are expanding because we are afraid of dying." The admission hung in the air. Fear was not something that most species discussed openly, especially not in a chamber full of potential enemies. But Samuel seemed unconcerned. "You have ruled this galaxy for millions of years," he continued. "You have built something impressive. Hundreds of species, working together, maintaining peace across countless worlds. But you have forgotten something important. And what is that?" Xerath asked. "You have forgotten how to fight for survival. It has been so long since any of you faced extinction that you have lost the edge that once made you great. We have not. We carried our wars, our plagues, our disasters with us to the stars. They are part of us. They made us what we are." Step forward, his voice growing stronger. "We are not asking you to fear us. We are asking you to understand us. We fight because we must, because our ancestors fought and survived, and we carry that memory in our blood. But we also build. We also create. We also dream of a future where our children will not have to fight at all." Samuel paused, letting his words sink in. "So here is what humanity offers. Friendship to those who want it. Trade to those who deal fairly. Knowledge shared freely with those who share in return. And a promise." "What promise?" Xerath asked. "Leave us alone, and we will leave you alone. Treat us with respect, and we will return that respect. But push us into a corner, and you will discover why we survived everything our homeworld threw at us. You will discover why we are still here when so many other species are not. You will discover what happens when a species that does not know how to surrender decides to fight." His eyes swept the assembled representatives. "We do not want that. We have had enough war to last us forever, but we will not shy away from it if that is what you choose." The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, High Chancellor Xerath nodded. "The Council accepts humanity's terms. Full sovereignty, full recognition, full partnership in galactic civilization." She looked around at the other representatives, daring any of them to object. None did. "Welcome to the galactic community, Captain Drake. We look forward to a long and peaceful relationship." Samuel allowed himself a small smile. "As do we, Chancellor, as do we." He turned and walked toward the exit, then paused at the doorway. "One more thing? Yes. In our culture, we have a tradition. When you meet a stranger who might become a friend, you offer them your hand. It is a sign of trust, a gesture that says you come in peace and expect the same in return." He turned back to face the chamber and extended his right hand. Palm open, Xerath floated toward him, her ancient eyes studying his face. Then, slowly, she reached out with one of her tendrils and wrapped it around his hand. "May this be the beginning of something new," she said. "Something better than what came before." "May it be so," Samuel agreed. And with that simple gesture, 12 million years of galactic history came to an end, and a new era began. An era where humanity stood not as servants or subjects, but as equals among the stars. An era where the species that had nearly destroyed itself learned to build alongside those who had never faced such trials. An era where the galaxy learned that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is not the one with the biggest fleet or the most advanced technology. Sometimes it is the one who simply refuses to know when they are beaten. And humanity had never learned that lesson.